We are concerned not merely with the technical problem of securing and maintaining peace, but also with the important task of education and enlightenment.
To the very first joint effort here. I think we call it the combined Congress of White House UFO, Grant Cameron and Desta Barnabe, and Strange Recon with Chase Williams and myself, Jeff Kingsbury. This is going to be, hopefully this is going to be a routine thing, right? And maybe we get together once a month or so and we talk about what we've learned. And well, basically I'm just here to listen. So anyways, I know that your last work, Grant, that you're putting together, or at least what you've been working on for a while now, is the psychedelic thing. And it's basically consumed my entire life now, the psychedelic aspect of this thing, because it's one of the ways that I can actually make connection with like this. I don't know whatever. I still don't know what to call it. All I know is that I get nowhere with nuts and bolts. I get nowhere with FOIA. I get nowhere with anything. I can't meditate either, but I go take a couple psychedelics and all of a sudden I'm in it. I'm talking to them. I'm like Terence McKenna once said, you're one quanta away from an alien world, you know, like completely different. And that's exactly what it is. And has anyone here other than Chase and I moved on to the dimethyltryptamine world at all yet? Have you started or looked into that?
No, it's harder to get here than it is in the States. You got a free enterprise thing going on now.
I thought you could order it in the mail in Canada.
You can use
DMT as well.
I guess I should start off by saying that no one here in this podcast has any, makes any, synthesizes it. We're not a part. We don't suggest you go do it. There are some decriminalized cities in the world and countries that it's perfectly legal. Maybe you should travel to Peru or stuff like that. Coast Guard, stay off the Strange Recon vessel. I don't have any here. So
our experience absolutely only happened in Peru, and we go there quite frequently. They're very lax about the vaccination and COVID. So you know,
for lunch,
and they don't stamp passports.
There you go.
Right.
You go there during your lunch break. You're a businessman. You go there and fly back in a couple of minutes.
It's a private jet. That's right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Well, I'm excited to talk to you guys because you are one of the few people who are actually working on have picked up on the psychedelic angle. I think most people are still into this world of technology and all this kind of stuff. I just listened to an interesting interview by Roland Griffiths, and you know, he's the main guy with the psychedelic lab at Johns Hopkins. And he was doing this interview and he said, basically he looks at it and says, there's a big question. What the hell's going on? Like, what the hell's going on? And here's the guy that's been doing this for a long-term meditator for
that's on the wall
years,
in the lab.
20 years in psilocybin. And his basic question is exactly what I'm doing. And I think you're the same thing, is you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And you suddenly get this little doorway and you can walk in there and you're not interested in any, like I always say, I'm not interested in the dancing bears. I'm not interested. I just want to figure out what the hell's going on here. Tell me. And you guys, I appreciate talking to you guys because you guys are on the same path as I am, is that you realize this is some sort of real dramatic contact modality where you may not know what's going on at first, but it is a different world than the world that we're living in.
Yeah. It's beyond alien, yet somehow familiar. It's kind of, I don't know. It's definitely the easiest way to kind of get any answers. Whereas like here in this material, whatever you want to call it, maybe it's not material, this place, we're always trying to figure out the how things work, but it seems like it's possible that maybe sometime in the future using psychedelics, we might be able to articulate why. Like it's this strange kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. I just like a peripheral translation of what's going on. And it's like, there are answers there. And they're there to be, you got to figure out how to ask the right questions. You got to figure out how to experience it correctly. It's kind of like a fine line. I personally think it's like a muscle. You got to keep doing it to make it work, to understand it, to get so familiar with it that you can kind of hone your feelings and make it all work. But how did all the shaman, why do they call it the answering plant, or why do they call it the plant with answers and stuff like that if it doesn't have something to do with it? And they were figuring out stuff all the time. Is it innate knowledge? Is it gained knowledge? Because I'm conflicting with my own guess here. I think you got to go back a bunch to do it a bunch to understand it, but then it wouldn't be innate. It'd be, you're still going to learn. but it kind of feels like what your download, the idea of download, it's kind of you go there and it just occupies your thoughts. It suddenly is part of you. I don't know. I think that's a part of it. I think it really needs to be looked at more than just a few people willing to risk their neck saying, I want to look at DMT or I want to look at psilocybin and stuff. It's like I was just saying to Project Unit J, these are all emerging sciences and everyone's just afraid to do it, but we're right on the tipping scale where once everyone goes, it's going to become like a flood where all it takes is one credible person to say that dimethyltryptamine, you do go somewhere. You're not just...
Yeah, there's phenomenal research now that, there has been for nearly a decade now in neuroquantology, which is neurology and quantum physics combined. And some of these researchers, Desta Grant, at Hopkins and other universities around the world, have more or less proven that. We know that we're interfacing on a physiological level with a quantum field of sorts. We know that microtubules in the brain that surround the neurons see these vibrations, and then there are these theories like Hoffman's theory and others that support the position that maybe we really are interfacing with this field. And you guys know I support this quantum hologram idea, where you have a point of source of everything. There's no separation, there's no time, and then everything else just kind of reflected out. Every perception is a different facet along this.
What does that mean? There are no aliens then?
Experience. No. I think maybe it's possible there are other spheres. Maybe it's possible that other planetary bodies in the same 3 dimensions that we occupy have other intelligent species that have evolved that are also connected to the field, but maybe there's this weird interface between 2 spheres that occurs or can be played with or analyzed, or who knows? I don't know. The experiences, in Peru, they're all over the place. You're with the creators, and you're with the creators, and I've been with what I at the time thought were the creators of my universe.
Oh.
Can I ask you a question? Worlds in front of me. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question before you get into that? Do you know the Noetic Idea, where this is not just information? When you're having these experiences, does it have a noetic quality in terms of this is actually how it works? Like you're talking to God or something, where
while you're there,
without question, while you're in it. Yeah, there's no question about whether or not it's real and whether or not the information that you even know what they're presenting you is not real. Sometimes you even like this, it's instant feeling like something these entities present to you, deep down whatever they're trying to show you is bull crap, whatever it is, and you're instantly filled with the knowledge of it, and it's a time, it all breaks down to that noetic type of sudden weird. You're everywhere, you're everything, you got all the answers, and yet you're not allowed to keep it and take it home with you and play with it when you're I don't know what's the deal with that, but that's another part of it, what Chase and I talked about. I lose a ton of it every time I'm in. Another friend of Jeff and mine is very skeptical, and every time I'm in, I try to bring back information to just throw in this guy's face, because I want him to have the realization that that there's something else going on. He's very nuts and bolts, and every time I get to this point where I'm coming back and I go, oh shit, it's gone, it's all gone. I just had it, it's all gone.
So let me ask you the question: why do you think that happens? Like I have the different theories where I think the DMT guy says that it's coming from the 6th dimension or whatever, and to me it's this filter that once you come back into the physical world, like if you have a dream, the story is, if you have a dream in your head, do not even move a finger, because as soon as you move a finger, the left brain comes back online and says, oh, he's waking up, okay, let's go, and they shut the filter, and it's like trying to bring back a dream that that filter closes. So I don't think it's any sort of 6th dimensional stuff. It's just stuff that is so far in the field that you have to maybe learn how to bring it back, or you're not intended to bring it back. Maybe that's a possibility.
I think that's it.
Lean towards that. I lean towards the second part you just said.
I don't know. I kind of lean towards the first, and this idea of the left brain, right brain that you've talked about so many times. Both of you guys have talked about so many times in your written works, and and on your shows as well. You know, there's a lot of science to that. You get a lot of people that hear left brain, right brain, and immediately go to, well, there's no such thing as left brain, right brain. You know, but they don't study the neurophysiology that's out there, and there is such a thing as left brain, right brain. You can clearly see it in stroke patients, and how various types of strokes affect the brain and the physiology and what the person can do and what they can access. I think you're right. I think that information is probably utilized or accessed through one side, and then when your thinking brain comes back online, your thinking brain goes, no, that's not useful. You don't need to know the secrets of the universe to go to the grocery store, Chase.
Yeah, it's time to go to the grocery store.
So we're just gonna close that door real quick.
We can all look back though. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but we can all look back though, and we can. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I can remember I can remember like 5 dreams in my life that were so impactful and so crazy. I didn't let them go. I held on to them forever. There was a time I died in a dream. There was a time I saw the Indonesian floods, the tsunami in a dream. There was a time that I watched my parents get killed by a UFO over and over again for a week after I saw the UFO. Wow. So these things stayed with me forever. That's why I don't know if it's one or the other, because I mean, my first major dimethyltryptamine trip where I had like the ego death and everything, it was like the ego death was part of going there, and forgetting was like a part of coming home. That's what it remarkably felt like that to me, because it was like, yes, you don't need any of this information. Not that the information made any sense anyways, but it was just,
Now you have us left brain guys. So let's bring in the right brain woman who actually has spent her whole life working on this. So Desta, talk about this thing, because you spent a lot of time researching this, trying to get in, trying to move across that veil, get over there, get the material and bring it back. So what do you think about all this stuff about being able to access it, retain it? Is there a way to get in the field and keep it? And is there a filter? What do you think's going on here?
Well, I definitely think that, like Jeff was saying at the very beginning, it's the biggest part of it is doing it over and over and over and over, and then trying to figure out how to play with it, trying to figure out once you're there, how to bring it back, how to remember it, what you have to do. But yeah, you do have to do it, in my opinion. It's not necessarily psychedelics. It could easily be psychedelics, right? Even just any kind of psychedelics, even just like smoking weed. But it's the once you're, or meditating. So for me, it's both things, right? So it's like meditation and getting into channeling. And at the beginning, I would do the same thing that you were saying, Chase, all night. I would be doing the meditation. I'd be talking to these beings. I'd be like the entire night, like asking every single question I've ever had in my whole entire, like, you know, forever, about like guys I dated when I was like 15. And it's like, why was this guy such an asshole? Why did this happen? Like, I literally went through my entire life and I was asking every question of every age of what happened to me. Why did this happen? Why was this a lesson? And I was getting the answers all night long. And then wake up in the morning and I'm just like, I don't remember one thing that happened, but I got the answer to everything I ever wanted. And that happened for months and months and months, maybe 6 months for me, until I started trying to play with it enough or figure out what it felt like when I could remember something in the morning, what exactly I did to be able to bring that over. But it's the same with smoking or whatever, doing psychedelics. You have to do it enough times that when you bring back information, I think you have to see what it feels like and what you have to do and just play around with it yourself. Like Grant is great. I hate hearing my own voice. So I would never sit there with a tape recorder, but that is the best thing ever for Grant, to be doing this stuff, to be writing the book and just having something where you could just be talking the whole entire time. The thing is, talking to me and channeling as well as doing this brings me out. As soon as I hear myself talking, it's like, I hate it so much. And I know I'm recording, then I remember, did I set the recorder? Where's the recorder? And then it ruins it. And hearing myself talk in that stage, like, I don't want to do any of that, but that is one of the things that you can do or whatever. But I think that the main thing anyways, is that you have to play around with it. You have to do it enough times that you have to have the feeling and get in the mindset or whatever when you're doing it, even if it's just meditation. And I've had many of them, just like Jeff was saying, like insane meditations where I saw images of the craziest things that I will never, ever forget. But of course, I've had a million meditations where I don't remember anything about what happened or nothing happened. I was just trying to quiet the mind or whatever. But when you can play with it and know how to bring it back, And then it's part of your life, I think. And Jeff, like you were saying, it might be in between everything of like the reason why, like, are you supposed to be able to forget it on the way back? Or are you supposed to be able to bring it back to share it with other people? I think, or it feels like to me when I'm doing it, is that it doesn't matter that I don't remember it. Having experienced it means that it's somehow part of me. And even though if my like 3D conscious brain doesn't remember what just happened the night before, it's in me now somehow. If it's like, if the field is there, but then I have my own little like auric field or something like that, and I've pulled it and it's like more attached to me, so I could still get to it more easily because I have directly experienced it before. I can't remember it all the time maybe, but I think having the experience links it more closer to you, and it's still part of you, even though maybe it's subconsciously or unconsciously. Maybe you don't ever remember what it is, but I think having the experience, even if you don't bring it back and you can't remember, it layers upon itself, and it's like information that somehow it's part of you. And I think it definitely makes a huge difference, and it still creates what your future, what your reality is, or what your, you know, like how you make your decisions and stuff, because it's still information, even if you don't think you can access it, in my opinion. I think
that photo, that somewhat iconic photo of the brain on psilocybin and the brain not on psilocybin, with the neural pathways, just popped into my head. Do you think that's similar to kind of this? Maybe you know, are you saying, Desta, that there are certainly benefits to having these experiences, even if you don't remember exactly what the experiences were? I have a question in that same vein of thought. If it is possible to remember everything, if you can train yourself, play with it enough, and understand how to utilize this data and retain it, do you think that you would still be having the same human experience if you had access to all of that information?
Yeah, good question. Maybe that's the reason that you're not supposed to remember it. But I know when I started doing microdosing, and I've said this, I think, to Jeff before anyways, but one thing is, I have a terrible memory, and I always say this, I shouldn't say it, because obviously that's making it part of my reality, but I always have a terrible memory. And but the funny thing is, a lot of these things, and I remembered one just at the beginning of the show when we all started talking, some of these experiences, it takes a trigger for me to remember it. And I think I would never have remembered that if this person didn't bring it up, but then I fully remember it. And so maybe, but when I started microdosing and then smoking maybe at night or whatever, my entire time, like after I smoked, all I would be doing is remembering the dream I had the night before and like memories from the past, right? And Jeff and I, we were talking about, it's like some kind of like random memory generator or something. It's like, yeah, what is with all this stuff? But the longer I was microdosing and the more I was smoking with that, all it was helping, it feels like that might be some kind of memory control trigger or something, yeah, where it's like flashing, and Grant, maybe it has to do with like the Bangston thing or something. Why are all these random? But the thing is, when it's happening, I'm remembering like, oh, I never would have remembered that. Oh my God, that was the best experience ever. I never would have remembered it. So maybe you're not supposed to remember it. And maybe you're supposed to have the filter, like you're saying, the filter closing, and then people triggering memories or other things triggering these memories. Because maybe we're not supposed to know all of it, because you're right. Maybe that changes the way that we are. And because we're humans being here and learning these lessons, maybe we're not supposed to know everything. Maybe this is part of the
I can make a comment on that. There is the triggering thing. Definitely. You see in the UFO thing, you see Kurt Russell, the famous story where he's flying his son into Phoenix Airport on the night of the Phoenix lights. And he completely forgets anything about this, talking to the tower. And then Goldie Hawn years later is watching this thing and he's going, that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. Like, what's she watching? And suddenly it pops into his head. Or you see the whole idea where people say, oh, these evil aliens, why do they block your mind? Why do they take all this stuff? But they don't. They block it until a certain point, like Chris Bledsoe, when he's like 46 years old, and then suddenly it's like, hello, okay, get ready. It's time to wake up. Or and they just sort of open it up, and you get terrified. But then when you go under hypnosis, you realize, as all experiencers do, that it's been going on your entire life. So there's these triggering things where if the beings are there, they're allowing you to remember when the time is right. Or if you, I don't know if you know the story, there was actually in, maybe Desta, you can help me. There's a woman in Texas years ago who was really hated the Greys. She gave a lot of lectures. She died very young. She said they were liars and they were this and that. I can't remember, but she was very close friends with Candace. And so I said to Candace, I said, why did she have all the bad experiences? You had all the good experiences. And what she said at one point was she was using self-hypnosis to remember her events, and they were all bad. And then she said she told her husband was, you know how it is, if the event is there and they want it out, almost like Betty and Barney Hill, where you're having these bad dreams where they're basically forcing you to go to a therapist to open this thing up. And she said her husband was having this very terrible time. She said, well, let me teach you the self-hypnosis thing. And maybe you can help remember what happened to you. And she said he went under like instantaneously. She just started instantaneously, and he said they're over top of the town hall. And he said, and then they said they had him on a table, and they were putting an implant in his leg, and they said it is now time for you to remember. So here's this woman saying, you know, they're liars and they're deceiving us and they're keeping all this stuff secret. And yet her own husband, it's like, okay, now it's time for you to remember. It's time for you to come forward. And you see this over and over again. Sherry Wild is another example where she doesn't want to talk about this, and she opens up her computer and she's looking at the computer, and it's on the Word program, and it's like page 3.5. And she looks on the thing and she looks at it and she goes, oh no, we're not going there. And they had typed out the first part of her story, and they were forcing her. And then she fought it, eventually wrote the book. And then she tells a story where she's driving down the road, and suddenly there's this 3D hologram of a scene in the car. And she goes, what are you doing? I'm driving. What are you showing me this stupid thing for? And they said, this is the first scene to your book. And so it's like this timing thing where whether it's our higher self or them, one of the key things is that the beings, and I always point this out, if you see 40% of all 40% of all abductees or experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Near-death experiences, it's 31% say they knew the answer to everything in the universe, and 30% of near-death experiences say they knew the answer about everything about themselves. In the UFO, it's 20% say they know everything about themselves. So it's basically 60% of both things say they knew the answer about themselves or everything in the universe. And I would even ask these people, how do you know it was everything? How do you know it wasn't something number 6, 7, 8 on the far side of the universe that I forgot to tell you about? And that's where this noetic thing comes from. They'll say, I'm not sure. I just know I knew everything. Yeah. So the beings know everything. The beings would have access because they gave them access to that whole idea. And the idea is we're only allowed to remember certain things that they need you to remember. And you see this over and over again where people are being triggered to remember things.
It's certainly confusing. Second, to address what we were talking about earlier real fast, and obviously you don't actually, like you were saying, Desta, you obviously don't lose these things that are happening in this world because, like you said, they do just trigger and come out randomly. You just like Chase will say something happened, and I'm like, oh, holy cow, that happened to me too. I cannot believe that. You know, like, so they're obviously in the back of your head somewhere, which would support the whole idea that maybe there's, you know, the consciousness and you are completely separate things operating the same means of transport. But yeah, and then to answer what you also said about like the sudden awakening of information, why is it that some people on this planet seem to not have that effect? Like I'll watch like Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, and I'll have guests on that don't lose any of this information. Are they special or full of it? I don't get, because I mean, obviously the worlds are connected and they are actually getting some stuff. I've heard of some people that can meditate and then go take pictures above their house and see blue weird UFOs. So obviously there's a connection between doing this stuff in this field and in this real world. But what is with the people that somehow don't shut it off? Like the people that claim they don't stop channeling. They don't have to go anywhere anymore. They're in full connection all the time. Is that just wishful thinking? Because they don't wake up suddenly. They just have it forever. They got all the information. It's in my book. It's in my, it's volume 7.
That gets questionable because you know what the phenomenon is like. I mean, it appears and it disappears just as quickly. Or like I'm starting to ask people now when they have a UFO sighting, I say, so what was it doing? And they go, wasn't doing anything. It was just there. And then you say, how long was it there? 2 seconds, 4 seconds? Was it there for you to see? I think so. I think it just wanted me to see it. And that's how the UFO thing works. It's this forgetful thing. It's just little glimpses and pieces.
Yes.
And so you always have to be very hesitant when someone says, I was on Mars and I was here, I was there, and I know everything and I'm dealing with them. That's because that's not the way it works for most people. Most people, it's this idea where they're getting you to figure it out. They're just putting these little things in your head and they don't allow you to bring everything back, whether it's psychedelics or UFO experiences or near-death experiences or whatever. You have this sort of a block, which is probably there for a reason.
We need to open these people's brains up. Okay, and they need to volunteer for science.
What's the purpose? I mean, I'm still, you know, if the purpose isn't to get to the point where you have this awakening event, you know, if there are people that have theorized that, you know, individuals or iconic figures such as, you know, Jesus and the Buddha and et cetera have had these awakening events. If the purpose isn't to awaken completely and be one with the field and understand what you are and why you're here and possibly, I don't know, turn into a ball of light and stop having a human experience, which completely terrifies me, by the way. If that's not the purpose, what's the purpose? Like, what do they want us to do?
Confusing as hell.
Yeah, right.
Well, one of the things is that if you take a look at the psilocybin work done at Johns Hopkins and 40 other universities and institutes in the United States, now in 20 in Europe, where everybody's cashing in on this thing now, they do the thing where it's, you know, 80% of people with non-treatable depression, 80% of smokers say 2 years out don't smoke anymore. Alcohol, right. 59% of people took LSD, never had another drink in their life and stuff. So it's happening in the field where you are, the healing or whatever's taking place in the field, and you are a changed person. I think everybody would agree that when you may not remember what it was, but you are a changed person when you come back.
Yeah.
So then they're trying to make us realize that we can lead healthier, happier lives? Is that the purpose of
Chase,
contact?
Do you remember the guy that you referred me to on YouTube that did like 150 high, you know, remember that? That guy, that kid that did all those trips in a row?
Yeah.
That?
Right.
Yeah. And okay, this is gonna be a little rough to talk about DMT. NSFW for a second, but let's just say one of the key aspects that they were telling him was to, excuse my language here, but quit touching himself. Quite literally, like one of the things, like he was constantly being addressed about all his flaws, and it never went away.
There's, you know,
and the ego death that stayed with me quite a bit, and my bad trip stayed with me quite a bit. It was almost like, God, I don't want to have a bad trip again, but it was also like, maybe if I'm a better person, this won't happen. Like, I don't know. Yeah. It was a very strange feeling, and it did. The ego death part of it stays with you. If anyone ever has the ego death and DMT, that crap stays with you. I don't know what.
I can't remember the name of that guy, but he's on Reddit. He's got there's very one person that's interviewed him. There's about 4 hours worth of video interview, and he consumed DMT almost every day for like 150 or 170 days.
That's a lot.
And he says a lot, but that is one thing that he says. And the guy interviewing goes, "They told you to stop masturbating?" And he says, "Yeah, you know, it is. I'm giving away they said I was giving away my energy, and to realize, you know, and they'd show me images of me masturbating, and so, you know, you can imagine how awkward that is. You look at yourself masturbating, and go, well, I probably shouldn't do that. I look like, you know, an idiot." And so he stopped. But I tell you what, and maybe the three of you have experience with this, but when we had Jay on earlier, Jay was talking about meditating, and, you know, we mentioned Samadhi, but he mentioned that he was able to, at one point in meditation, see the room around him without opening his eyes. And I've noticed that I can do that while I'm meditating, but I've also noticed that happens after intercourse, immediately after intercourse. And I don't mean to take the show in any weird directions. I mean, it's all natural, right?
Are you saying like
lights in the sky? I mean,
Chase,
not 360 degrees, but immediately after, it's almost like coming back from psilocybin or from DMT, and with eyes closed, I can see all of a sudden, bam, I see the room, I see the door, I see the furniture in the room, and sometimes other things that aren't actually physically in the room. So, I mean, maybe, you know, there's a connection there. Because initially when I heard that, I thought that sounded kind of kooky, but...
It sounded personal to me. It sounded like the guy had a problem. And that's why the things were addressed. Because honestly, they do address things in your life. And that's what I was bringing that up for, is because that was that one guy's problem. And I had like a bad trip where they were like, you know, they were straight up telling me I've been a jerk to women I've dated and things like that in the past. And it was like, dude, fix your shit. You're out there in the real world kind of like representing us. And you're walking around like an idiot, you know? And it was like this, and that's why I sometimes call it the Interverse. I don't know if that's appropriate, but I feel totally psilocybin, the slow enter to the Interverse. DMT is the rocket in there. And once you get to the end, it's like, we're operating the system in here and you're doing crazy stuff out there. So get your shit together. And I don't know, maybe that's completely wrong way to look at it, but it does seem they want you to fix yourself. And what would be the point of them wanting to fix yourself in this world if they don't, you know, what if they're not here, if this is the physical and they're why would they care if they didn't have some sort of stake in the game?
Yeah, Desta, please.
Well, I'll say that because I always like to think of these things in either the holographic universe or the simulation theory, as well as this physical thing where it could be like beings and aliens and stuff. So I would say, yeah, it could be them wanting, like, it's like, what's the purpose of them, you know, aliens or beings or whatever, wanting to fix you? But it could be you. Like, if this thing all is you, then of course you want to fix yourself. You, of course, know if you're doing something, like if you're an ass to people or whatever it is, you of course know that, you know, subconsciously. So if you were to have some kind of trip or whatever, of course you're, you know, it doesn't even have to be higher self. It's just like the bigger part of you is going to try to be sending you a message and helping you with your lesson of being on this, you know, this 3D world or whatever, however you want to say it. But of course it's you, it's your reflection of you. It's you looking at yourself going, okay, we're going to try and get to this guy now, but it's you, you know, the whole time. It doesn't have to be the other beings trying to talk to you. It's just like you trying to say, come on, Jeff, this is what we're trying to do in this life. And I know you keep forgetting, because that's what we all do, but here's the lesson. Remember, you're this time around, you're supposed to be trying to do this better or whatever. It could just be, you know, a different aspect of yourself.
You guys were the first ones to bring that up with me, because remember I told you my experiences at 18 years old, and my friends and I all saw what clear as day looked to. I said it was an alien, they said it was a ghost, whatever it was. But then you brought up the idea that I did that. And I don't disagree with it at all, because I absolutely think it's possible. If you look at the work, like, you know, SRI and stuff, there's obviously something clearly to this non-locality thing that I said earlier, it might be dolphin echolocation, and when we came from the ocean, maybe we still got a little bit of it left. But there, did I save my, this is I'm trying to segue into this, but my experience years later, I find out that maybe this quote unquote alien saved me. So am I doing DMT and breaking off into these entities to talk to myself, as well in the real world? Did I project an alien out of myself to scare us out of a building? Is that how dramatic it is? And if that's the case, why doesn't it happen when I like if I'm about to be in a car wreck or something, or if I'm, you know, or lightning's going to strike me?
You know what the answer would be if you were on a DMT trip right now? Yes. That would be the answer. And then you'd see the universe and you'd come back and you go, shit, I don't know.
Okay, so when I was a child, there's something my mother used to tell me all the time, and that is random strangers would save me, okay? And they'd come out of nowhere, like completely out of nowhere. And I'd be in the middle of the woods on a horse. The horse would buck me off. I'd have one foot in the stirrup, and it's dragging me like in an old movie. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, some guy just grabs the horse's reins. Every time. I flip off my dirt bike, fly down a cliff, it lands on me, the dirt bike is revving at full rev, burning out of my back until it runs out of gas at like 13 years old, and I'm stuck down a cliff. Random person, didn't know I was down there, just comes up, lifts the bike off me, and will drop lines on me like, hey, you only got one go at this. What are you doing, kid?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, and to me, is it me my entire life? Was I a little chunky Asian guy on a bicycle that showed up to help me in the woods one day? This is where I'm not sure if I can get my disbelief to cut the crap, but it's like, I don't want it to be me. Is that okay to admit? I don't want it to be me.
I think I didn't want it either. When I read, have you both, Chase and Jeff, read Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot?
Yeah, it's right here.
I don't think I have. I
like,
got a bunch of million YouTube videos on it.
It's that book.
Which was channeled. Remember?
Oh, that's true, because he had, right? Linda said
he's an experiencer. Bud
Oh,
Hopkins'
really?
client. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But that book, the very first anxiety attack I ever had in my whole life was after reading that book. I read that book like 5 times in a row, and then I started not being able to sleep. And like, as I was closing my eyes, like thinking of some of the things in that book of like how reality isn't what you think it is, and you can't actually physically see, you know, like this part in front of you because of where your optic nerves stick into your eyeball. So it's just like it's like your left brain interpreter is basically like filling in what reality actually is, because you can't actually physiologically see what's right in front of you and stuff. And I started having panic attacks all the time thinking, holy shit, like what is reality? Like, or there's a picture in the book of like, you know, like the waves, like what, you know, like what a tree is, like the tree outside my window. If I'm not looking at it, it's waves. If I look at it, it collapses a wave function and it turns into particles and you can actually see it. And when I read that book, I was like, holy shit. So as soon as I close my eyes, everything just looks like a bunch of wave patterns. And I totally like lost my mind reading that, but I kept reading it over and over and over because there were so many crazy examples of what reality could actually be. Oh, now I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say. But that book totally changed everything and made me think it really is only about myself. Like, because there is nothing out there. Everything is in here. So it is only me.
So I'm Desta and Grant and Chase.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
you're a reflection of different parts of me that are coming like to teach me things and to have interactions with me. And it's like, I don't know if I believe that more than the whole co-creation thing and everyone can see. I don't even know, but I always think about that because it had made such a life-changing thing to me. But it's definitely like, there used to be books in the 70s when I was a kid that my parents always had that were always about angels. So like what you're saying, Jeff, like the angel, like I was just, you know, in downtown New York and crossing the street and a bus came barreling out of, and all of a sudden someone was right behind me, pulled me back and then said something like that. Hey kid, you only live once, like some like weird thing. And you're like, where did that person come from? They just saved my life. And then they look around and the person isn't there anymore. So it's like, is that, so people used to call it angels, right? Like in the 70s.
That's what my mother called it. Another guardian angel saved you.
So is it an angel or is it yourself? To, like Grant says, the theory of wow. So is it yourself? Because there is only you. There isn't anything else. So of course it is yourself. It's yourself coming to do something. And then it's the theory of wow, where you're like, holy shit, a total random stranger just came out of nowhere and pulled me up and my mom thinks it's an angel. So maybe it's literally just to make you think, holy shit, what is this? Like it's something, I don't know what it is. And then you forget about it. But then like we're saying before, then the trigger comes up. Then you realize you've had hundreds, if not thousands of these holy shit or like wow experiences. And you're like, something is to the other side. This reality isn't what we actually think it is. I don't know what it is, but I've had all these crazy things happen. And maybe it's literally nothing except for to make you know that this reality isn't physical, and it's to make us all want to explore further, whether it's through psychedelics or meditation or whatever. It's these contact modalities we're obsessed with. Maybe it's because we've all had so many of these, like, you know, like wow experiences our whole life. We're like obsessed with trying to figure out what the actual real reality is, just like all the other people that have been writing, like Michael Talbot and everything.
Desta may be able to help me. There's actually a chapter in one of the books on that. It's called The Third Man Effect. Which book was that in? Where I remember the first one was told to me by a guy who went off a cliff in BC, which is like the high mountain area. They're going through BC, and he went off a cliff and hit a railway crossing 50 feet below. And he said he got out of his car and it was raining and he had to crawl back up to get to the Trans-Canada Highway. And he said, suddenly there's this guy beside him and this guy's helping him up the cliff. And he didn't even think about it. He gets to the top of the cliff and he said he's standing there and he's looking for the guy and the guy was gone. And it's called Third Man Effect. It happened to Lindbergh going across the ocean, where this guy appears in the back seat of the plane and starts keeping him awake and telling him what to do. These kind of effects.
Joseph Slocum, the first man to sail around the world, was accompanied by a sudden, what he described to be a short Spanish-looking sailor that took the wheel for him when he got sick because he ate rotten food and almost died. And he said he accompanied him for miles and miles and miles. Conversations, got the boat to where it needed to go. No one on the boat. He was by himself the entire time, completely hallucinated. But that third man factor, that sounds very eerily similar to what I've gone through quite a bit. I've never I've never even heard of it or really put it in that context of, other than
it's actually famous with mountain climbers. They call it the third man effect. When guys get up in the top of a mountain and suddenly they're getting help up in the top of the mountain. It's happened to quite a few mountain climbers when they get into trouble up high.
But they would be in that contact modality state, right? They would be in a trance-like state because of lack of oxygen, because of the physical effects on their body, because of all these things. So it would be like, are you hallucinating and seeing this other thing? Are you crossing the veil and you're in another reality? Or you're just more connected so you can see things that are in this other dimension? Or are you hallucinating, making them come? Or is it always you? Yeah.
And one of the things just going back to what we were talking about before is bringing it back, where Desta, you had the same thing with me. I think one of the first mornings we met at the mall, you had that dream thing. Remember? And you said you were madly writing before we had the meeting at 9 o'clock. I had the same thing. Whitley, I was having a conversation with Whitley, and he talks about this being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had this encounter with these, what they call the beings in London, and they wanted this interview, and they were waking that woman up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And suddenly I had the interview with the beings, and suddenly I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then the one day I didn't wake up at 3 o'clock, it was 4:12, and I was really upset. It's like, what the hell? I told Whitley to interview me about this. Now it's 4:12 and I look like an idiot or whatever. And I went into the next room to meditate, and I opened up what I call flow state, which I find when you get into the psychedelics thing, where this flow state is there, where the stuff is coming as fast as you can think. And I remember I was sitting there and it was just meditating, and I'm saying, don't move, don't move. Pick it all up, and it was coming. This stuff was coming to my head, and then I said, "Okay, ready?" I run up and I run back to the bedroom, and it'll be the same thing. I get the piece of paper and write like hell, write it all down, and then the next morning I look at it and go, "What the hell is that?" It doesn't make any sense.
Yep, that's what it seems to be like. The flow state also it counts for physical stuff too. And I know that you're a walker, right, Grant? You walk and you got and that's the same thing for me. In the infantry, I'd put on a rucksack. You walk for 15 miles. I've seen guys fall asleep and keep walking. They're literally in a ruck march for 15 miles. And but the same, like you suddenly, it's like you're just turned into a robot. And I don't even know how to describe it. And your body is going on its own, and it's reached a flow state. And I think it's a same thing, but just a different process. And you just open up to the most obscure, random thoughts generated in your head that where did this come from? Why am I here? And sometimes, most times for me, it doesn't make a sense. I don't know why I would ever hear that in the first place. But yeah, it's that's why I always would go back to Rene Descartes. I mean, it's like, is it innate knowledge, or is it earned? Where does this stuff come from?
One of the things I think we got to remember is like the thing they gave me in one of my flow states was the thing about the blocks, that you're assuming that all the blocks are correct. They're not correct. You've got a bunch of stuff wrong. So we're assuming time, space, and we're past, future. If it's all here, all now, no time, no space, then all the inventions of the future, everything that happens in your future lives is there, and you're going into the field and you're accessing it. It's all in one spot. We keep making these assumptions that we're going somewhere, and there's actually time and space, which is what interests me about when Chase talked about it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this thing with time, because what I see with the DMT thing is it's so dramatic. It's like someone says, "Oh, I really don't believe this. Here you go. Sit down, try it." And I mean, you're going in there. There's not like meditation where you got to sit there for 20 years and practice or whatever. You're going in whether you like it or not. And that thing with time, when you talked about the 1,000 life thing, talk a little bit about that, because that really, I think, is important for people to know that if that happened to you, that just destroys the whole idea that there is time and space, and that, this kind of stuff, and this idea of multiple lifelines and this kind of stuff. So describe that process. And was it every single event of all these different lives, or how did that thing work?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I've heard people describe in other experiences, in fact, in Strassman's, film, The DMT Spirit Molecule, there is one of the individuals interviewed in the beginning says something like, "I lived for 1,000 years." And here Strassman is saying it's been 15 minutes, and he's trying to wrap his head around that. I haven't really experienced that. Time completely changes. So that my first experience, I was in someone else's body. I was a woman. I have no idea what my face looked like. I know I had really nice legs. I remember that. I remember looking down and going, "Oh, I've got nice legs." But I had so many experiences in her, as her, and they went by so quickly, you know.
Instantly, right?
It's like almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like almost an entire lifetime, but I couldn't, there was so much Desta Grant that I couldn't tell you guys anything other than she had really great legs. Like, I don't know. That's all I could tell you about it.
No, but
and I think she was in South Africa.
Okay.
I don't think this happened in the past. I don't think it happened in the future. I think this is a person that's alive right now. Okay. I couldn't tell you who she is though. In another experience, I was multiple people over the course of an instant. So I was a small African-American boy. I'm assuming he was in the States. I believe he was on a bus. And he was sitting in a passenger seat on this bus, facing straight ahead and kind of looking off and down to the left. And his arm brushed against the side of the vehicle, and it was cold. And I felt the cold, and I had the ask him, I'm going to move my arm. Like, that's it. And then instantaneously, I'm an older woman that has the exact same thought, the same experience, the exact same thing happens as her. And then I'm an older man, an older Caucasian man. The same thing happens. And so I can remember those two experiences more clearly than the others. I have had other experiences where I've been through thousands of different scenarios as either me or someone else, but it's so much. I couldn't sit down and say we're at the Piggly Wiggly and he was having a chuck wagon, and I have no idea. Like, it just bam, 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 and you go, oh, well, that was real, but I have no idea what any of it means.
Yeah. That just to talk about what you said real quick, Chase. I mean, that time thing. There's something about the sudden expansion that you don't get to articulate. You don't really get to say like what it is, because you go from being like, I'm a human and it's 2021, and when you're there, it's like you're everything and everywhere all time. Right. You know, you even if you have the slightest flashback of a day, like I went back to high school when I saw that entity, I didn't travel anywhere. It was just like it all happened. It was like you're already there. It's happening. Mm-hmm. It's happening right now. It's like, you know. And that's it. Yeah. And it was just like, it's like you couldn't tell the difference. It was almost like this time doesn't exist. Maybe I don't want to get into this bullcrap science theories, but I don't know, that maybe you do go somewhere, and the reason why we experience time is simply because the mechanical nature of the place we're living in. But I don't know, there is something that just ends with time. It just goes away. You're everything and everything and everywhere.
I think it's what you said, Desta. You know, you talked about the holographic universe, Talbot's book. And I have this idea in my head of like a multifaceted prism, right? Everything's at the very center of this spherical idea that I have constructed in my head. This is source, and when you consume DMT or you take psilocybin or you meditate and you reach samadhi or whatever the contact modality is, you travel throughout this weird house of mirrors kind of thing, right? And with DMT, I think because it's vaporized, and this is why Strassman and Gallimore have theorized that, you know, if you do this in a laboratory with IV and it's controlled, and you know the rate of metabolic consumption, the breaking down of the, you know, if you can control that, maybe you can use DMT as a very precise tool. But when I've done it before, it's just, you know, you guys know, I've been with aliens on a table, and then I'm a black boy on a bus, and I'm brushing my hand against the side, and you go, why in the hell would I care about that? It's such a little, how is that significant to me? You know, and to see three people have the exact same experience, back to back to back, the exact same thought. I mean, that reinforces the idea that there is no separation, that we all experience, you know, things. And I don't know. When it comes to time, though, Grant, I would say I've had experiences where, you know, that have only lasted 12 minutes, and I come back and I go, it's still light outside. Like I feel like it's maybe several hours had passed at least. Even though I know, so there's not like this big realization or, shock, because I know that it's only going to last 20 minutes or so.
Even your first time, Chase, you weren't like pretty shocked about the time difference? Because I remember I told you I woke up and I accused the doctor of playing a trick. It was so vivid. It felt so. I woke up and go, "How did you do that?" Like he was responsible for this crazy long trip I had.
I was, but I mean, I'd consumed prior to meet my own consumption. I'd read so much about trip reports and watched other people. Like I knew kind of what to expect. That being said, what I visually experienced and heard, and the buzzing, and you hear this wow, and you go, as soon as you inhale the first time, you go, oh shit, this is not playing around. Like this is real stuff. Like, you sure you want to do this?
Noise? Did you hear that noise as well? Because
I hear the noise. I've gotten to the point now where I can hear the noise if I just focus. I don't even have to consume the stuff. But when I consume the stuff, it's not always, but usually, 7 out of 10 times.
How would the world change if everybody did it? I mean, does it got an aspect of showing us that it's not the materialistic sort of nuts and bolts world, or how would it actually change the world, do you think, if everybody had to do that?
I think everything's just, yeah.
I don't want to be a jerk, okay, to humanity, but I have a serious feeling that the majority of humans are just like regular animals where they don't really care about anything. They just want to keep on living. So it's not going to change anything in their life. I mean,
it's a spectrum. Everything's a spectrum.
It's a
right?
spectrum with a
so
massive
the question
gap.
came up. This question came up earlier. I think Grant asked Desta the question. What would happen if? Well, now I don't remember what I was talking about. But it's a spectrum. So I think to answer the question, it's some people would be absolutely convinced, having been, maybe they were atheist prior, they would be absolutely convinced that there's a God. Other people would be absolutely convinced that we're all one and there is no separation and it's a holographic universe. Other people would think that the brain is a crazy evolutionary thing, and somehow my mind decided that it wanted to see a guy walking out of a door that was made of eyeballs. I mean, that's what Jeff saw, right?
I think the key difference between all of us is that it generates interest, right? Like I know I've heard of kids that do it while they're drinking and partying, and they come back and they're like, oh, that was cool. I talked to a cartoon cat, and then we'll come back and we're like, we have to figure this out. But we have to figure out what just happened, because there's something magical, and it's just,
I think it goes back to what Desta said about
NPC versus real player.
It's all one experience, right? And reflections of that experience. And so there's a spectrum of all possibilities, of all interpretations. And if there wasn't a spectrum, then there likely wouldn't be any experience for any for me, Desta, whoever's reality this is. I don't know.
Well, if everyone out there that I'm worried about right now are constantly making fun of is also me, that technically it's back on. So they can forgive me. I just forgave myself, the Catholic way. Yeah. Oh God, I was going to bring up what you were talking about earlier, Chase, about the being different people. Did you actually see your face at all, or did you just seeing like your body?
It's just the experience you're having now. First person view. I saw as the child. I lifted my arm up and looked at my arm after it wasn't quite that exaggerated. I'm raising it for the camera, but my arm was to my side. I brushed the side of the vehicle, and then it was cold on the side of my arm. And so I moved it away, and that was the whole thought. It's not even, the language really wasn't even there. It was just, you do something that's uncomfortable. You're riding in a vehicle and your arm touches something, and you just move it away because it's
that seems like a message, though, right? That seems like you got a message that we're all
That's what my interpretation that was my interpretation at the time. Is we're all having the same experience.
If there's physical aliens and they come here one day, are they also us? Are they?
I think so.
Yeah,
well, again,
everything.
Version of us. That's what a lot of people think. Yeah.
Or are they actually physical aliens? That's what I say. Where they said to me, go back to the people I asked, all these people, Nancy Tremaine, I asked Sherry Wilde. I even asked Ron Johnson. I said, Ron, you dealt with LB for like 40 years. Did you ever ask him? You must have told me. Did you ever ask him if he was an alien? And he said, I keep asking him. I've asked him 100 times. He won't answer it. And if you take Sherry Wild, the whole story was that she had put the book into the publisher, and Da, her being, said he was from Andromeda. And then the publisher said, he can't be from Andromeda. He's a gray. He's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. What, like, he's scamming you. Like, what's going on? She says, well, I'll go ask him. So next time Da comes, she says, are you like actually a really alien? And he said, no, that would not best describe who I am. I am an etheric being on a mission through the cosmos for the creator. And she said, well, what do you come as this sort of scary looking gray thing for? He said, what do you mean, I scare you? And she said, yeah, you scare me and you block my memory every time you come, and you scare the living daylights out of me over and over again. And he said, well, it's more functional. It's more functional than making a human thing. So it's the idea, Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, all men and women are but actors. They have their entrances and exits. Each man plays many roles. We're all etheric beings. You're pretending to be a human, and they're pretending to be aliens, and they come in and they can go out. And that's what Yossi Ronan, the experiencer from Israel, said. They told him, when we come into your world, we can take on whatever body we want. We can do whatever we want. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it. So we're assuming that we are flesh and blood things, and we are etheric beings coming in and taking on this role. And according to the beings, we can change that if we know how to bypass that.
Well, I'll admit my high school encounter with this thing with all my friends, unless it had some piece of amazing technology that it could walk through walls and stuff like that, then it would have to be a non-physical thing. It literally walked through a wall like at 40 feet off the ground right in front of us. So I don't know. I could say it's a technology, I guess, or I can just finally openly say out loud that it possibly wasn't a physical thing. But I don't like that because that feels like it takes away from my story. But yeah, I hope, oh my God, I hope that they're real physical things and they're going to express to us. We haven't figured that out either. We can also have things. We can tap the field. That would be, and we join together. Gray and human. I don't believe in the gray.
It's got to be both. This human-centric view of things. You know, the everything revolves around the Earth, and you know, the Earth is the cradle of this great universal experiment. I don't buy that. It's the same thing has got to be happening everywhere, unless you know, you remember the Shed statement. That they're here, we're in contact with them, and they're not going to make open contact until we realize what space and spaceships are. Unless there's truth to that, unless, you know, astronomers and the like, and our understanding of space and other star systems is just completely wrong. And but I don't know. I think it's both. Enough, right? I think it's both. I do have a question though, before I forget. This is just what you said. What both of you said earlier. You mentioned, you know, maybe you're generating these experiences yourself. Maybe that thing that you experienced, Jeff, was something that you projected or created. Maybe these things that happen because we want to protect ourselves or something like that. I've had experiences where I've been told, I've been shown my entire life, all experiences, all thoughts, all feelings, every single individual scene, if you will, in like a color of light in the void of space. And I've been more or less told, nothing you think, nothing you feel matters. Just stop asking questions. None of this matters. If how can you have one with the other? If nothing matters, then why are we worried about what matters?
Yeah.
What we think matters.
Okay.
Well, I have one time dilation kind of story, but the information that I got at the end of it might, for me, kind of was a tiny 1% bit of an explanation to what all these different things could be. So I had an experience where I have so many things that are always tied into music. So I just randomly got some brand new song. I downloaded it, bought it on iTunes or whatever, had it on my phone, and then had this experience where I, smoked, lie down just to listen to this song or whatever. And this whole time thing happened. So the song is like 4 minutes. This is a normal, length song or whatever. It wasn't super long, 4-minute song. And I dropped into a, alternate dimension or whatever you want to say, where I had an entire life where I lived as a, whatever. Wow. I can't remember any of them. And the song has a really long fading out end. And as the music was getting quieter and quieter, I was dying. Like that was the end of my life or whatever. And then I finally died. And then I woke up and was so surprised. It was like Desta in the bedroom kind of thing again. So, and because I was so high, I couldn't, I didn't have the wherewithal to just put the stupid song on repeat. So I got up and I thought, holy shit, I way more liked what I just experienced than this. So I pressed play again. So I pressed, you know, like play the song again. Lie down again, had another entire lifetime in an entire different dimension. And then the song fades out, and it's a 4-minute song, but it felt like it was my entire life in this other dimension. Then I died, and then I woke up and I was like, holy shit, I want to do this again, and press play for 4 hours. This 4-minute song, and I never figured out just to put it on repeat. I woke up, like I, you know, got up, pressed play again, felt not asleep or whatever, but lie down again, had another entire life, woke up, you know, and died, and the whole thing. So only at the end of the 4 hours, when I was like finally coming to, I started going like, okay, holy shit, it's like getting light outside. That was the entire night. Like, what exactly is happening here? And so I got the, like, you know, feeling or image or whatever you want to say. I saw this, like my entire other bedroom across the way full of bubbles, like full of actual like foam bubbles, like zillions of bubbles in this room. And what they kind of like made it seem like is that out of an entire, you know, 14 by 14 foot room or whatever, I had just experienced like 1 centimeter's worth of bubbles. And what happened was every life that I had just experienced was like a bubble. And then when I woke up and pressed play again and had a new experience, I just came off of the bubble into the next bubble and lived the life of that bubble. And then when I pressed it again, had a new life, I lived it off of that bubble. So, which sounds crazy, but I mean, so what that meant to me was that is how an infinite number of lifetimes, dimensions, parallel realities, whatever you want to say, I just experienced the full bubble, which is the full life and existence of all of these different beings in such a small amount. If you think of the universe being the size of my, you know, bedroom or whatever, and I was only doing 1 centimeter, yet it was 4 hours worth of 4-minute long chunks of all of those different lives. So they were trying to say, like, there is an infinite number of things out there happening. And when you fall into these states and you can experience, like you're saying, Chase, with like the kid and then the other person's arm, like, does that mean that's you in another life? But I was kind of just getting the feel of that's in an infinite number of realities. That's just all of these beings and what they're experiencing. And so we're like lucky to get a glimpse or a snapshot into what all these different, again, and maybe it's a theory of wow, which is just like, you're supposed to come back going, holy shit, I just had like whatever that is, 1,000 lives in a 4-hour period. And I experienced everything that person was experienced. I experienced the entire dying process, and then I did it again. So maybe it's just, again, the theory of wow, where it's just, we're supposed to be trying to figure it out. And it's like, what the hell is going on? It doesn't make any sense. Why would I be all these different people? But maybe it's not even the point of trying to figure it out. Like you're saying, Chase, like trying to very specifically figure it out. Maybe none of it makes any sense and doesn't matter. And you're not even supposed to be figuring out. It's just to present something to you where you've never heard of it before and where you're going, holy shit, well, something is not how we normally think it is, right? Something else is out there, whether we're supposed to be figuring it out and it's supposed to be the most important thing that we're trying to find the answers to how this all works. Maybe we're not supposed to be, but it's definitely more fun.
You got to share hang on. You got to share
John
what song
Hopkins,
this
eat
is.
your heart out.
The song, you got to share the song, and you got to share what you were smoking too, because I want to try this. You did this 4 minutes for four until 4 in the morning.
Well, for 4 hours, it was
4 hours
until I could figure out to start asking, like, what is happening. I was so out of it.
Essentially, she hit the snooze button nonstop.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez. Yeah. That's intense, Desta. Yeah, no.
And
it was every part of the lifetime. You had
the entire life, and it wasn't humans all the time. It wasn't people. It wasn't, but it felt like the entire lifetime, the whole time. That's why when I woke up, I was like, where am I? And it's like, oh, Desta. It's like, no, not Desta. Press play again. Back to this craziness, because I was in Like, I remember when I was a sunflower. A
sunflower.
Like a sunflower.
Oh, wow.
In this other planet. But the life was one of the best out of all the lives that I had that night. This sunflower one was like, you know, it's just, you know, an incomprehensible amount of information and feelings that I was having during each of these 4-minute things, where it felt like it was 1,000 years, felt like it was an entire lifetime or existence, not even lifetime, like we have an 80-year lifetime. It's like existence of each of these beings. And then as the music, I only figured that out at the end, but as the music was like dropping off, it's like, oh, okay, time for the life to end because she's about to finish it or whatever. And then it was like the dying process in that life as the, you know, fade out of the song happened or whatever. So,
jeez,
thanks, Desta, you read another book.
Yeah.
That's an adventure story in its own right there.
I've got one comment and then a question for which I've already forgotten, and the comment I've forgotten.
That's the way it's going to.
Well, so what does that say about ufology? You see, we're getting this report, this director of national intelligence, and it's this very simplistic thing. It's like, oh, these things may be threats, these physical things, what's going on here. And then you look at the world that everybody's describing here, and it comes to what I always come down to say, like, man, you guys haven't got a clue. It's like exactly. No clue what's going on here. Like you're not even scratching the surface of what reality is about. And yet you see these very smart guys that are putting this stuff out, which just sort of blows me away. Oh, I know what the question was. The question is to Desta. And that is, you did the 2 books on channeling. So you're able to go into the field. You're able to actually ask questions. Have you asked questions? And how does the answers you got enlighten us as to what's actually going on?
About what specifically? Reality?
Well, about reality, about, you must have asked about the bubbles or about, multiple lives and stuff like that. What, like, I always say, like, now more and more I say, it's going to be less physical, the world, than you think. It's going to be more spiritual. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex. And so what is because you've been able to go in there and ask questions. And I think like the material I get, it's noetic material. So it's going to be somewhat accurate, the material you're getting back. You're getting these answers. And oneness is the key message. But do they give us any enlightenment based upon what you've got? And tell us what your 2 books are so people can get the enlightenment.
Well, I always ask, but this is the thing. I ask so whatever the experience is, I always ask at the end, like, what does that mean? Or what is the message, or what does it mean? But that's what I get. I would get something weird, like the vision of a gigantic room and filled with bubbles. And then, because they're trying to show different ways of how to explain it. So the information I get every time is that you have literally no concept of what we're saying. And that's why these things are so crazy, because this is the easiest way for us to explain it to you, but they explain it in a different way every time. So I said the story one time about like the golden Buddha. The end was like the golden Buddha, and he had like an infinite number of like golden long, like an infinite length of golden threads coming out of his head, kind of. And the Buddha was Source. Source was this gigantic fat golden Buddha, like how you normally see the Chinese Buddha.
What is happening today?
All of the people, every person was these strings coming out of his head, which just really meant that that's how we're all connected back to Source, is because we all come from Source. We're all part of Source. And it's just these like, we're all just a different thread, and throughout the thread, there's just like these little tiny nodes or whatever, and that's each of our lives. So like we're tied to all of our present, future, parallel, blah, blah, blah lives, because each thread is each one of us, and we're all part of the Buddha. So we're all also connected because we're part of him, meaning Source. So we're all one, because we are all coming from the one, or this fat Buddha or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, I get it. But they always say, you don't get it. They always say, you think you get what we just told you, but this is nothing to do with what reality is. We're just trying to, and I always say dumb it down, even though it sounds bad, but they're trying to dumb it down so we can understand. But that it seems like, oh, I totally get it. But then it'll be this other thing where they say it's like the bubbles, but the bubbles is the same thing. So the room so the room is this, it's like they're all like, you know, metaphors. So like the room is like the Buddha and all the bubbles are like the strings. It's the same thing. They just give it to me in different images or versions or whatever, so I can understand that there's like this much percentage of what just happened, what felt to me like, you know, having 1,000 lives, and that's like a centimeter compared to a room full, a gigantic room filled with bubbles. We're all connected, and that's what they were trying to say with these bubbles, is that like as the song was going and I was like, the lifetime would be the circular bubble, and then I would just go to the next bubble, the next bubble, the next bubble, but you know, it's a 3D, you know, room of bubbles. So I could have gone to any of these things. Sometimes you're a sunflower, sometimes you're a man, sometimes you're whatever, but it's still saying we're all one, because all the bubbles are connected. It's a room packed filled with foam. And so all the bubbles are connected, and you can go and experience lives of everyone else because it is all connected, because all the bubbles touch each other at some point, because it's a room packed with foam. Or it's like the golden Buddha with all the threads coming out of his head. You could go and jump to other lives or jump to different lives on the thread that is your thread, but it's all one because we're all part of the Buddha. It's the same thing. They give me different, you know, so, but then I'm like, oh, I get it. But they're always like, but that isn't really what it is. It's close. It's like kind of close to that.
Dusty, do you remember me telling you about my first breakthrough experience where I'm looking up at the universe? I've never been into Eastern stuff at all. I've obviously seen the Buddha's face, both versions of him and whatnot, but I had this trip, the whole entire world turns into lights, and then they ego death, they're shooting me like I'm in Star Wars, and it's all happening, and then all those lights gather together and turn into the Buddha, and then I blew him up. I shot right through him and exploded, and like those lights just became everything else again after I went through him. I was like, I had no idea why I would have seen the Buddha. I've never been into that at all, but it was a very huge smiling Buddha face. It was like almost like and I just went right through, but Buddha was made up of the lights that just destroyed me a second ago. Like that ego.
Jeff's having a big day today. There's been a lot of stuff.
All day today.
Jeff's going to turn into a ball of light on the podcast in a second.
All day today, I've been hearing this stuff.
And everybody's going to say it's bullshit, but it won't be.
The triangle on the wrist, the Buddha, Jay's story about being next to that airplane. Because when I was practicing meditation, it's like I accidentally remote viewed. I don't know who I saw that guy was that I showed up in his room. I don't know anything about this stuff. It just happened. And it's been happening all day today, and it just happened during this like 5 different times. It's insane. I don't know why it's just wacky, so similar. But I was just going to say the intelligence thing we brought up. There might be a reason why all these messages seem absolutely baffling, impossible to understand. And even when the entities are like, you're not going to get it. It's like, have you ever wondered why you have to feed and give water to a dog its entire life, and it never figures out how to feed and give water to itself? But a human child will eventually take care of itself. But it's like, we might be at that level of intelligence where we get stuff, we can interact with our owner or our bigger ones, but there's a wall. You know, there's a wall, and that wall might just be that these things are just this ultimate source, and what we perceive is the lackluster human version of it, and everyone's got these great interpretations. But another thing I was going to say real quickly was the bubbles thing. Obviously, the bubbles have something to do. I know this is going to really be basic. I don't want to sound stupid, but there's a reason why planets and moons and stuff like that shaped themselves into a spherical shape. And in psychedelics, I've encountered bubbles of some sort multiple times. It's almost very strange. And one of the times it was beings in the bubbles, and they came to like kind of talk to me, and I embarrassed myself because I was scared, and they just went away. But it has a lot to, I think there's something to do with like a globe like shape in psychedelics. Yeah. Maybe you're traveling in it. Maybe it's all metaphor and they're just trying to articulate something new, but there is something weird. I actually heard a guy the other day. It was one of the people that was in SRI years ago. He talked about it's the most proficient form. So when you are out of your body or something and you're like in this traveling state of energy or whatever, you eventually form like what's like a bubble. And I thought, oh my God, is that why I was seeing those faces in those bubbles? Or these things were kind of coming up to me. I don't know. I think there's just something there too. And I've heard a lot of witnesses talk about seeing like soap-like bubbles, almost like a glistening type of floating orb coming past them. And Grant had someone on your show that made a painting one time. Yeah. And these faces in the bubbles. I saw that painting and I was like, son of a gun. I cannot believe this is all connected.
Yeah. Anybody that sees orbs will absolutely maintain. They'll say, can you see the face in it? That's my mother, or it's an alien, or it's, and I'm going, no, I can't. I mean, everybody, Desta, we've done those things. I bet you I've got 50 people and they'll all say the same thing. That's one of the patterns. They have thousands of these sightings where they're photographing these things and they'll all maintain there's a face in the orb. And I always look at it and I go, yeah, I guess you can see a face. And they're absolutely, can't you see the face?
I never would have believed it unless I saw what I saw. I swear, I absolutely believe it now. There is something, yeah.
Well, wow. One of the interesting things that this goes to my podcast yesterday, where I have McGilchrist. I think I sent the video of him. This guy where he's talking about the left brain and the right brain. And he said the left brain cannot handle analogy, has no idea how analogy works. And so when you see the implants, where Roger Lear and Sims say there's 250 implants with people with the experiencers, and they're all on the left side of the body, which means they're affecting the right brain. So that's how they talk to you. That's why the right brain is in the field, shuts down the left brain. You're in and all the lessons are through these sort of parables and analogies where they're trying to say it's sort of like this, but it's not like, that it just sort of give you an idea. And that goes back, I think, even to what's his name, Donald Hoffman, where he says everything's an analogy. You can never actually interact with reality itself. It's not, you can't.
Yeah, icons. Yeah,
it's non-local. You can't. And everything is this sort of analogy that it's sort of like this and it's sort of like that.
Well, it would make sense because humans are really great at coming up with metaphors, analogies, and things like that. That's like what we, especially me, I'm like so broken brain. Sometimes I actually have to physically come up with some sort of cartoonish situation to understand the thing. I have to like come up with some ridiculous visualization that makes, everyone else is like, you just wasted 10 minutes doing it. But
let's do a small session here. We were talking at the beginning and I said we wanted to talk about this. Let's talk about the